They slid the folder across the table without a word. One name, no photo, no address, just silence and a date. The man who always smiles before a kill didn't smile this time. He stared at the paper like it whispered something only he could hear, then closed the file and said, "I don't do ghosts." They paid him double. He still walked away, because when death itself refuses to follow, you start to wonder what you've become. You ever seen a man flinch just from a name? Not a gun, not a threat, just 5 letters on a piece of paper. That's how this started. No gunshots, no chase, just a hitman with hands that never shake, shaking. He leaned back, locked eyes with the one who hired him, and muttered something no one had ever heard him say before. "Are you sure you want to do this?" That's when they should have walked away. But greed makes people brave, and bravery without brains, that's just a shortcut to a coffin. They thought money could erase problems, thought hiring the most feared killer alive meant the end of your story. But the moment he saw your name, the tone changed, the room got colder. He didn't ask for a down payment, he asked for backup. And when even that didn't ease his nerves, he said something that rattled the room. "I've buried legends, but this one's already gone too far." Now ask yourself, what kind of person makes a killer hesitate? Here's the thing, most people walk around thinking they're invisible, that no one's watching, that no one's tracking the way they move, the way they think. But some people, they don't walk, they echo. Every step you took left a scar somewhere, on someone. You didn't climb the ranks, you carved your name into them, and now they realize they were never watching you. You were watching them, but they made a mistake. They assumed your silence was weakness, that because you didn't bark, you wouldn't bite. Funny how fast people forget. It's not the loud ones that kill, it's the ones you never see coming. So now there's this file, this room, this deal that was supposed to end with your name crossed out. Instead, the one man who never missed turned down the job, not because he couldn't finish it, but because he knew the truth. You can't kill what already buried its past. And while they were plotting in silence, you were sharpening in shadows. While they whispered your name with fear, you were rewriting your story with scars. That folder wasn't a contract, it was a warning. And the hitman, he wasn't scared of you dying, he was scared of what you'd become after they'd tried. Curious yet? You should be, because this story isn't about the killer. It's about the reason he walked away. And let's be clear, people like you don't need protection. You are the warning. You're what happens when pain doesn't break you. It builds you. Every betrayal, every lie, every time they left you for dead, it didn't weaken you. It forged you. Now, they're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to survive the thing they created. You ever wonder what makes a person untouchable? It's not power. It's not money. It's what they've already lost and survived. And you've survived more than they can even imagine, which means they're already too late. Let's talk about why they feared you. Because people don't hire the most expensive monster in the underground to deal with someone harmless. Nah. They do that when they realize they can't control you, and that scares them more than death itself. You weren't loud, you weren't flashy, you just didn't fold. You weren't built like them, and deep down they hated you for it. It starts small. They laugh when you stay quiet, mock you for working in silence, roll their eyes when you choose solitude over spotlight. But then you start winning, quietly, consistently, and suddenly your silence isn't awkward anymore. It's threatening. Funny how people only respect silence once it starts echoing louder than their noise. You didn't play by their rules. You burned their rule book and rewrote your own. No begging, no pleasing, no pretending. You just moved different. While they obsessed over attention, you obsessed over the mission. And the more you rose, the more their masks slipped. Because nothing exposes weakness faster than someone who doesn't need validation to dominate. They couldn't predict you, couldn't profile you, couldn't pin you down with labels, gossip, or fear. You were an algorithm they couldn't crack. That's why they panicked. That's why they paid. Because when someone doesn't respond the way they expect, you become dangerous. Want to know the real reason they feared you? You reminded them of everything they pretend to be. Strong, focused, untouchable. You were the mirror that shattered their illusions. And people don't like being reminded of their lies, especially not by someone who never even raised their voice. Here's where it gets even funnier. They tried to replicate you. They copied your words, your moves, your discipline. But you can't mimic soul. You can't fake war scars. They wanted your results without your battle wounds. And when that didn't work, they turned bitter. Like kids throwing tantrums in the face of someone who already graduated. So they whispered, they schemed, they plotted behind closed doors like scared little shadows, pretending to be storms. But you didn't flinch, because you'd already lived through worse. And that scares the hell out of people when you wear your pain like armor. You ever notice how the ones who fear you most are always the ones who once underestimated you? Yeah, that's not a coincidence. That's karma knocking on the back door while they're still playing poker at the front. They thought you were bluffing. You were just waiting for them to bet everything. The truth is, people don't fear your power. They fear your patience, your ability to wait, to suffer, to endure. You were never playing for the applause. You were playing for the aftermath. And now that you're here, they're choking on the silence they used to laugh at. Keep watching. Because the story's only getting darker and more real. You think they feared you then? Wait until you see what scared the killer. Not every warning comes with flashing lights and sirens. Some arrive quietly, like a whisper behind a locked door, or a stare that lingers too long. And before they ever signed that contract on your name, those whispers were already circling like vultures. Don't provoke that one. Leave them alone. You don't want to find out what happens when they're cornered. But of course, ego makes people deaf. They didn't listen. They thought they were untouchable. You see, there's always that one guy in the room who knows better. The one who's been around long enough to spot a storm before it hits. And when your name came up, he didn't just raise an eyebrow. He backed away from the table. Fast. That's the moment they should have known this wasn't business as usual. But no, they laughed, called you overrated, said, "He's just quiet, not dangerous." Yeah, right up until the quiet turns into consequences. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what doesn't make sense, and you never made sense to them. You didn't lash out when they tried to bait you. Didn't break when they hit you where it hurt. You just watched, observed, calculated, and that terrified them. Because it meant you weren't emotional, you were strategic. You weren't reacting, you were waiting. Here's the fun part. The more they dug, the more they realized how little they actually knew about you. You had no scandals, no online tantrums, no trail of mess. Just wins, just silence, just momentum. Like a ghost walking through walls and walking out with results. It drove them insane. So they started digging deeper. And that's when the whispers got louder. One guy said you walked away from a deal that would have made you millions just because your instinct told you it smelled off. Another swore you disappeared for 3 months, only to come back twice as sharp, like you'd trained in hell. And the most disturbing one? That story about the man who tried to ruin your life and vanished. No revenge, no threats, just gone. Replaced by silence. That's the kind of legend that makes people twitch when they hear your name. Still think they feared your success? No. They feared your restraint. They feared how calm you stayed when they expected chaos. They feared how much you endured without snapping. Because anyone who can suffer that quietly is saving something for later. And now, later's arrived. Let's be real. Your story isn't built on applause. It's built on warnings. And every time someone ignored those warnings, they ended up learning the hard way. Painfully. You're not the storm. You're the pressure before it hits. You're the last calm breath before the whole world flips upside down. And that's what made even the hitman pause. But don't get too comfortable, because we're just getting started. You've seen what they feared, you've heard what they ignored. Now wait until you find out what the killer read. Information doesn't scare killers, it excites them. But what he found in your file, that wasn't just data. It was a graveyard of failed assumptions. He expected the usual: family background, weaknesses, criminal record. Instead, he found voids. Pages blacked out. Reports missing. People who'd tried to document your life mysteriously stopped trying. The first report was from someone who claimed to know you from years ago, said you were always alone, always observing, called you the quiet one who never blinked. You know how rare that is? People blink when they lie, when they're nervous. You just watched. And in every story, you weren't loud or dramatic. You were just there, present, always present, like a shadow with a spine. He kept digging. Next file, corporate sabotage. You were blamed for a takedown that cost a major firm millions. But the report ended halfway. Investigator went dark. The final note read, individual declined to speak. Kept eye contact for 14 minutes straight. 14. That's not a person. That's a mirror no one wants to look into. Curiosity turned to obsession. He pulled hospital records. 3 ER visits, all internal injuries. No police reports, no complaints. Just notes like unexplainable endurance, refused medication, and one line that stopped him cold. Patient claimed pain is a reminder. That's when the hitman stopped scrolling and just stared. He wasn't looking at a target anymore. He was studying an anomaly. A person who didn't break when they should have. Who didn't retaliate when pushed. Who just evolved. Next page. Surveillance footage. You walking away from a burning car. No panic, no urgency, just calm steps. Like the flames didn't even register. Like you'd already burned once before and decided fire doesn't scare you anymore. The kicker? That footage had no timestamp, no location, just a note scribbled in red. Do not engage unless authorized by higher ops. Higher ops. As in you scare people with clearance badges. You want the best part? He found a psychological profile tucked in the back. Some military shrink tried to analyze you, called you unliterable, emotionally cold, spiritually detached, yet intellectually volatile. Volatile. That's how they describe someone who's never lifted a weapon but left war behind in every room they entered. He finally closed the file, not because he had enough, but because he couldn't process more. The longer he read, the more he realized this wasn't a job. It was a dare, a suicidal one, and that's not how he operates. No, see, he only takes contracts on people who can die. You were already something else, and if that doesn't give you chills, think about this. He didn't just walk away from the money, he walked away with respect. Because even killers know some names are warnings, not targets. Now stay with me, because what happened next? It wasn't in the file. It was in real time. And you're going to want to hear every second of it. Nobody really understands silence until it pulls a trigger. And that day, that day was different. He followed you for hours, through alleys, across rooftops, into shadows that felt more like your home than his. You weren't hiding. You were moving like you'd already counted every escape, every reflection, every blind spot. And still, he thought he had the upper hand. Rookie mistake. When he finally lined up the shot, everything froze. You were standing still, staring at the skyline like you were waiting for something. Or someone. No panic. No rush. Like you knew he was there. He adjusted his scope, ready to end what others feared to begin. But then it happened. You turned, slow, calm, and looked directly into the scope. Not through it, into it. That look? It wasn't fear. It wasn't even defiance. It was recognition. Like you knew him. Like you'd seen that same darkness before. In your own reflection. He didn't pull the trigger. Not because he couldn't. But because for the first time in years, he hesitated. And killers don't hesitate. Unless something shifts inside. Something old, something buried. You reminded him of himself, not the man he is now, the one with a body count and a reputation. No, the version before all that, the broken one, the kid with rage in his veins and silence in his chest, and that terrified him more than anything, because staring at you felt like looking at what he could have been if he hadn't surrendered to the darkness. You see, people assume strength is loud, that power is in explosions and shouting and brute force. But that day, you taught a killer that true power doesn't announce itself. It just exists, quiet, patient, inevitable. And the craziest part, you didn't even flinch. You didn't run, didn't scream, didn't beg. You just stood there, like you were giving him the chance to decide. Not to kill you, but to redeem himself. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Sometimes the strongest move isn't pulling it's choosing not to. He walked away, not because he failed the mission, but because the mission failed him. It made him confront something he wasn't ready to face. A man who wasn't a threat, but a mirror. A mirror that showed what's possible when you let the pain refine you instead of define you. You didn't win that day with weapons. You won with presence, with calm, with discipline. And that's why they'll never understand you, because they've spent their whole lives trying to be loud when the real ones move in silence. Still watching? Good, because this isn't the climax. This is just the midpoint. What comes next flips the entire story upside down. Being untouchable doesn't mean you've never been hit. It means you took every punch life threw at you, and instead of breaking, you sharpened. Let that sit for a second. They think untouchable means shielded, protected, guarded by fame or fortune. Nah. What makes someone truly untouchable is what they've already survived. Because here's the truth they'll never say out loud. You didn't get here because you were lucky. You got here because you lost everything and kept moving. You were broken in places that most people never recover from, and while they were out chasing clout, you were wrestling your demons in silence. They were flexing, you were evolving. You see, the ones who fear the fire are the ones who've never sat inside it. But you built a home there, and you didn't just sit through the burn. You learned to love the heat. That's what sets you apart. They get uncomfortable when things go quiet. That's when you start thinking clearer, want to know why no one could touch you. Because by the time they realized you were a threat, you had already made peace with every version of yourself they tried to destroy. They can't use your past against you. You already used it as fuel. They can't weaponize your pain. You turned it into armor. And they definitely can't shame you, because you've walked through your own hell and came back with the keys. Every scar they thought would ruin you, you wore it like a trophy. Every night you cried in silence, that was your training. Every time they doubted you, mocked you, pushed you to the edge, that was the exact moment they were building your legend. And the best part, they didn't even know it. Real power isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's quiet, ruthless, focused. It's waking up every day knowing the world is betting on your failure and still showing up. That's what untouchable means. Not that you're made of steel, but that you've been shattered, rebuilt, and now nothing sticks. You are the sum of everything they tried to destroy and failed. They broke your heart, you built a colder one. They shattered your plans, you drew bigger ones. They took your name and tried to drag it. Now it echoes in rooms they'll never be invited to. Let me say this loud. You didn't rise because you were chosen. You rose because you refused to stay down. And that makes you untouchable, not because no one can reach you, but because even if they do, they don't have what it takes to finish the job. And now that the killer walked away, they're realizing something worse than failure. They realize you're still standing, still watching, still moving. And that's when fear truly begins. Ready for the next part? Because what he left behind changes everything. The moment he disappeared, they assumed the worst. Did he fail? Did he vanish? Did you get to him first? But no, he didn't fail. He evolved, and before slipping into the shadows, he left something behind, a message, a statement, not for you, because he knew you didn't need one. You already knew who you were. It was for them, the cowards in suits, the ones who placed the bet and now couldn't handle the result. It was scrawled in red ink on a torn page from the very file they handed him. 5 words. No explanation, no signature, just this. You're not ready for him. That's when panic set in, because they didn't fear the hitman failing. They feared what it meant if he chose not to finish the job. You've got to understand something. This wasn't just any contract. This was a cleanup mission, a last resort. They threw their ace card down and it walked off the table, smiling. Now they're scrambling, whispering, rewriting every plan they made. But here's the part they didn't calculate. Your next move, because you weren't just watching, you were listening. You knew they were coming. You let them think they were hunting while you were memorizing every weakness they had. They're used to targets. They don't know what to do with a counterattack. And let's be honest, they wanted a reaction, a breakdown, a mistake. But all they got was stillness. That same stare that cracked the killer's spine. That unshakable calm that made every room feel colder the second you walked in. You didn't chase. You didn't scream. You didn't post quotes online or throw passive shots. You just kept building, quietly, methodically. And now they feel it. Oh, and let's not forget how poetic this all is. The man they trusted to eliminate you ended up validating you. He didn't just walk away, he respected the silence you mastered. He saw the weight behind your stillness, and somewhere deep in their greedy little minds, they knew if he backed off, they should have never stepped in to begin with. Let that sink in for a second. You didn't fight. You didn't defend yourself. You simply existed, and that was terrifying enough to shut down an entire operation. Who else does that? Now here comes the best part. While they panic in boardrooms, scrambling to protect what's left of their pride, you're already 3 steps ahead. You're not plotting revenge. You're preparing for something far worse. Exposure. Keep watching, because the final move isn't made with a weapon. It's made with truth. And when that truth hits the surface, nobody will be safe from the silence they tried to bury. Revenge was never your style. You don't bark, you don't broadcast, you just move. And lately, they've been hearing those footsteps behind them. Every meeting feels colder. Every shadow feels heavier. They used to laugh when your name came up. Now they whisper. They glance over their shoulders in boardrooms, tighten their grips on secrets, and pretend the silence doesn't feel like a countdown. But it is. Oh, it is. Because you didn't come back to settle a score. You came to end the game entirely. See, while they scrambled to contain the damage, you were out there building something unshakable. Not with noise, but with moves so precise they didn't notice the ground shifting beneath them. You weren't plotting vengeance, you were laying foundations. And now, their tower's starting to lean. That's what makes your rise terrifying. It's not rage-driven, it's surgical. You're not out here for applause, you're out here for impact. And they're realizing, too late, that you don't leave loose ends. You let people hang themselves with their own assumptions, their own arrogance. They thought you were gone. Nah, you were watching, evolving, smiling just enough to keep them comfortable. Until now. And let's not pretend this is just about them. This is about every person who ever doubted you. Every door slammed in your face. Every fake friend who clapped when you bled. Every boss who overlooked you. Every lover who laughed when you dreamed too big. You carried all of that. Quietly, and now it's their turn to carry the weight of being wrong. They don't get to rewrite history, you do. And here's the part they never saw coming. You're not mad, you're not broken, you're untouchable. And nothing drives people crazier than realizing they never even scratched you. The final laugh, it's not loud, it's not cruel, it's not even bitter, it's silent. Just like your rise, just like your name echoing in places they can't go anymore, just like the look on their faces when they realize you won. And all it took was not quitting. Now here's where I leave you, with a truth no one likes to admit. You don't become a legend by being liked. You become a legend by being unforgettable. They thought erasing you would make the world forget, but now they remember you with fear, with respect, and most of all, with silence. Because legends don't announce themselves, they haunt the people who tried to bury them.